Yes, we are
So the
Freudians.
first question is, just wanted to know if you had any suggestions for SLAs who come from really dysfunctional families, like you've shared about your particular story, and have developed sex and love addiction. Do you recommend dealing with one issue over the next, or staying away from the family while dealing with SLAA addiction, vice versa? Is there, and then if so, a number of months, is there an order or formula to guide me with? I ask because I am about to sign up with a coach, paid service, who I really connect with. Thanks for any guidance.
Well, let me say a couple of things. First of all, no coach should be looking at your past history. No coaches have the training, the understanding, the expertise, and any good coach would say to you, I'm not going to work with you on any issues, because the only stuff that the coaches are here to work on is stuff that's here and now. You've got an issue like you're trying to get a job, or you're struggling with addiction, but it has to be something in the present. Coaches are trained 1 year, not in mental health, not in addiction, but mostly in motivation. So I would never take on a coach, never take anyone on other than a licensed psychotherapist to work on trauma and past issues. So that's an easy answer. If your question was, do I start working with a coach on recovery issues first and then see a therapist to start looking at the past? My answer is yes, sobriety comes first. And if you're able to achieve it by going to lots of meetings, getting lots of support with your coach, looking at the past is useful, but if you can't leave the lunchroom without going to want to act out after lunch, then you're not ready to look at the past. If you can't get 60 days of recovery online, then you're not ready and it's not that you're not ready because you're not a good person or you're not smart. You're not ready because it takes a lot of emotional stamina to begin to look back at the past. And if you're still acting out, then you don't have the emotional stamina to get through the day. So get yourself 6 months of really solid, clear, clean, sober time on your sexual behavior, according to your plan and your program, and then start to seek some psychotherapy to stabilize and look underneath. That's how I would do it. By the way, just my own experience you asked me about, I had a horribly, major mental illness, crazy people raising me. I went to program for my first 3 years. And then when I was a little bit older, I started 26 and 12 steps. When I was in my late 20s and had a little bit of money and time, I started therapy. But I got sober on sexual behavior before I ever made it to a therapy session.
Okay. My husband just finished his first week in treatment. He'll be there for 30 days total. This is the first time we'll be able to talk and not sure. Oh, Friday is the first time we'll be able to talk, and I'm not sure what tone I should take. I don't want him to think he's off the hook, but I also don't want to dump on his progress.
So this is interesting because it's been really great, I have to say, and Tammy, you know this, we just ran a treatment program. And I just finished with, we did our first intensive, which is 2 weeks of intensive psychotherapy and addiction work with men who come here to stop their behavior and get right with their families and their lives, basically. And we have an intensive psychotherapy group. And the reason I'm bringing this up is sorry, Tammy, the issue again is marriage, right?
It was about
the first week of treatment, right.
What kind of tone to take on the phone?
So I've had this opportunity of sitting with guys in treatment while their wives are calling. And I'm usually not in that position. It's been a while. And so sitting there, I've been hearing all the stuff that's coming from the wives and all the spouses and the things that are going on in the evening, because we run the program, mornings. We have residents and treatment. And what I've been hearing is going on in the residence is not always what I would ask of the clients. So I think the best way I can guide you is to tell you what I tell my clients when they come into treatment with us. In terms of talking to your spouses at night, my answer is news, weather, and sports. This is an old expression. Maybe you've heard it before. It means nothing serious. And I say this more for you as a spouse than I say it for your guy or gal who's in treatment. You have to understand that the person who's in treatment has a therapist hanging around, a couple of buddies or friends. They've been listening to them for a couple of days. There's staff around. If something goes wrong in a conversation with you that's deep and heavy, we have lots of support. I'm not worried about my clients. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you sitting home alone on a Friday night talking about something really heavy with your husband you've not talked to in 2 weeks, and you run into some stumbling block or some issue that he's learning and he doesn't fully understand, but the way he's explaining it freaks you out. And then you're freaked out for the weekend with no one to talk to, no one to support you. So this is not a good way to do this. So I'm glad you asked. I know that you want more information. I know that you fear that the intensity of your worries and the intensity of the problem will not be translated to the treatment team. I know when I do treatment, that is never the case. I can't say where he went. So one of the things that I do when we run treatment is I have all the spouses write me a letter before their guy or gal comes to treatment. Now, we only treat men, so it's usually before their guy comes to treatment.
Yeah.
And I have men or women who are their partners writing me saying, this is what I've gone through. This is what it's been like. This is what I've experienced over the last few years or our whole relationship. So we have a voice of a partner in terms of their greatest concerns. We have a couple of pages of that from before we start treatment, before they even get to us. And so I think a good treatment center is already incorporating, I hope, your voice, your sense of what's gone on, or they're inviting you to share it. Your voice is essential because our clients, in case you don't know this, your husband lies. And if we don't hear your voice, we don't always get all the information, nor do we trust that we're getting it. That's why we reach out to outside people. But we do that hopefully in a therapeutic manner. So hopefully over the next 3 weeks, you'll be having discussions with a therapist. You'll be having discussions with, wait, we have a panelist who's pregnant? Is this the same person?
No, keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. Someone's pregnant. I'm like, woo, congratulations. Sorry, I get distracted. It is really best to speak to your spouse in treatment about news, weather, and sports. It's not that they are withholding from you, at least when they're in treatment with me. We've asked them not to go into anything serious, and not because I'm worried about them. I'm worried about you. However, when you're in family and couples sessions, which you should have or ask for, and a therapist is present, that is the time to get into the serious stuff, and you absolutely should. But on a Friday night conversation, it's nothing about how many times did you really, are you working hard? Just how are the kids? How are you doing? How was your weekend? What are you planning? Leave it at that.
Somebody chimed in, I said, raising my hand to this one, lots of exclamation points, awful, don't talk about anything that isn't what Dr. Rob says, lived it, very painful for the spouse. So affirming what you just said. So.
Well, I understand you guys really you think that, okay, now he's kind of being held in place and I'm going to get the information, and that's true, but not at home on a Friday night when you're just calling to check on the kids. That's news, weather, and sports. Keep it to the sessions.
Okay, so I'm kind of feeling sorry for myself right now. I was under contract to buy a condo, but after spending some money, I just learned that I have to pull the contract and won't get the condo. As I lay here waiting for the webinar to begin, I began thinking about reaching out to various guys. I'm a female sex and love addict. This is more a comment, but it's unbelievable how I wanted to reach out, act out, rather than just feel the disappointment. Happy to be here. So.
Well, let me say something to you. I really just want you to know that is typical of us. That one of the things that trauma does and challenging experiences do to people is it leaves us not really understanding why we react to the situations that we react to in the ways that we do. A healthy thing to do when you find out that, you didn't get something and you were disappointed is to call a friend, go to a movie, have an ice cream cone, take a hot bath, maybe do something nice for yourself, go out to breakfast with a friend tomorrow, not to masturbate for 3 hours and pick up strangers, but that's what we think about doing because all we want to do is escape. And the last thing we want is people around to disappoint us. And moving into the desire for sex, and let me just explain what that is. When you're lying there thinking, God, I can't believe I didn't get that place and I don't have the money, I'm so disappointed, all I want to do is go have sex. What you're really saying is, I feel out of control. And I'm looking for somewhere in my life where I can feel right now a sense of control. And I know if I get some hot guy to look at me and desire me, even if I follow through on it or I don't, I still have control over that situation. And that is what acting out is all about. I feel out of control. I can't handle the housing situation. It's not going the way I want. Where can I find some control? Oh, over here. And the feeling that's underneath, honestly, sometimes after many, many years of therapy and treatment, I still don't know what I'm feeling. But I do know when I want to act out. It's probably not because I'm horny or because I'm, need to get laid or I haven't had sex. It's probably because I'm feeling something important and I need to pay attention and I need to reach out to someone for help. And as long as I keep that information in mind, I always used to think, I got to figure out what I'm feeling and why I'm wanting to act out. Now I realized, doesn't matter. Figure that out later. Take care of yourself now so you don't act out. Stay connected. So I'm glad you're here.
I'm really glad you're here. And I got two things to say about that. First of all, I had that happen to me before with a house. And what I ended up getting instead of the one I really, really was disappointed about was so much better. It was So I want to give you hope that you may look back and go, oh, thank God I didn't get that particular one. The other thing is Rob and my husband both have called me on this, is like when I'm feeling out of control, I clean something, so this weekend I was cleaning the front entryway and washing windows, and Rob was like, you can come over to my house and clean. And I've cleaned closets.
And I live 2 states away.
Yes, exactly. But I clean a closet. I do something where I do have a modicum of control over it, but it is a much more healthy outlet for me than something else. So that, there are. And
I want to say, feelings pass.
Yeah.
One of my first sponsors said, you know what? Sometimes there's no better recovery step than watching a movie or two, meaning you don't go take the drink. You don't go have the sex. You're watching the movie and you get into the movie and an hour later you feel different. And then you think, why did I even want to go do that? So, if nothing else, give yourself the time for it to pass.
So a tag on to the person who has their loved one in treatment. She's the one that's expecting. She just found out she's expecting. She's like, should I wait until he gets home from treatment to tell him
that she's pregnant? No.
Yes.
No. Everyone in treatment will celebrate that. Everybody, if you are pregnant and you're planning on having this baby and it's important to you and you believe you and your husband are in a place where regardless of the challenges you're having, you're probably going to move forward, then I would tell him. If you are thinking that I don't know if I'm going to stay in this marriage, I don't know if I'm going to have this baby, if you're thinking of those kinds of thoughts, then I would tell him in session, not just in the evening. So if you think he will receive it with joy and happiness, if you feel happy and joyful about it, and you believe that the problems you're having right now are going to pass and are not going to impede upon your sharing and having this child, then I would cheer for him and tell him, and everyone he's in treatment with will cheer for him. But if you are really very confused about being pregnant and not sure what it means to you or him or what it will mean, then I would not bring it up on a Friday night when the two of you are alone on the phone. I would bring it up with a therapist present. By the way, when your spouse is in treatment, and in case anybody doesn't know this, at least in where I do treatment, you can always call and say, hey, something's happened at home. It's kind of important. I think I need to get on the phone with a therapist and my husband or wife. I'd like someone there when we talk. No problem. We're there. We will do that. That's our job. We may not always, he's not going to know and we're not going to know in treatment that he needs something, that you need something, but if you let us know, we will support you to have that conversation. But yeah, I would tell him while he's there.
So anybody have questions? Usually we run out of time.
No. If they're not asking questions, it's great because I'll tell them all the fun things we're doing. And then they'll jump to ask questions just to stop me.
There you go.
If you guys are not aware, we have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. I have about 45 podcasts. We have about 70,000 listeners. We are a top 10 addiction podcast. I promise you that some of the world leaders in attachment theory and addiction are on that podcast with me, along with some good old recovering people. I think Tammy's even got a few. And we've had people are just, what I've learned about the podcast world is that it's really light. There's a lot of fun, light things out there, but on sex, love, and addiction, we're talking about infidelity. We're talking about cheating. We're talking about healing relationships. We're talking about what is the purpose of having a relationship. And I think that is why we're getting so much traction. So Sex, Love, and Recovery, Sex, Love, and Addiction is the podcast. There. Now someone asked, look, we got 3 more questions. We got a question.
Well, it's a continuation. So this person says, I lost my virginity to an escort and have only had sexual contact with them since I was 18, 25 now. My self-image is that no woman would choose me over another guy at a bar. I try to imagine if it is happening, but it hurts. Oops, just slid. Sorry. I try to imagine it happening, but it hurts like a lie.
That someone would want this man? Is that what hurts him?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, number one, if you're standing around in a bar, you're hurting because everyone is standing around a bar is hurting. I have stood around in many a bar thinking I'm ugly. No one will pay attention to me, and no one did. I've stood around in many a bar thinking I'm amazing looking and I look great tonight, and no one paid attention to me. No one really gives anyone attention in bars. It's a horrible place to meet someone for any reason unless you want to get drunk. So one suggestion would be you might find healthier places to date. And I also think that for someone who has low self-esteem issues, an environment where you walk in and you don't know anybody is a bad place to date. You want to date when you're part of a church group, when you're part of a choir, when you're part of a running group, when you're part of a bicycling group. If you want to get to dating, find some fun activities where you'll get to know people just because you're doing something you like. And then maybe because you both like something, you'll find someone you get along with. Or even better, and you won't even know this till you do this, join that hiking, biking, choir group, whatever it is, and you'll make a few friends, and one of them will introduce you to a friend of theirs who's dating. So I think that being in social situations where you are known is far, far better way for us to date than going out with strangers, unless you're using the internet, in which case there's a whole different protocol. But one thing also, let everybody know you're dating. Let your friends, your family, the people you're working with. Never hurts to let people, well, I'm an avid dater, so it's like, let people know. Let them know you're looking, and you never know when someone's going to say, well, my sister-in-law just got divorced. Whatever.
You're right. And exactly, I was telling somebody earlier today, it's like I joined a co-ed volleyball team because, I wanted to meet people and wanted to do something I had fun with. So
is that where you met your husband?
He actually was also on that group, but it wasn't where I met him, but he was also participating.
So I met my 18-year relationship at a board meeting. I was traveling for a board meeting and doing some volunteer work. So that's how, and we were all going out for an evening. That's how I met my 18-year relationship. So yeah, it's by being part of something that you grow your relationships.
This person adds, I don't feel welcomed at any of those groups. Just feel like I'm hated.
So, well, if you feel you're hated by general folks, it's going to be much harder to date. And I think that, we have a saying there's a saying in AA, which is if you want to date, get a plant. If you can keep the plant alive, get a dog. If you can keep the dog alive, go to some 12-step meetings and make some friends. If you're struggling with the friends part, then you're not ready to date. You have to deal with your self-hatred and low self-esteem, which could be depression, could be anxiety, could be driven by the addiction, many, many things. But if you're not right with yourself, and I promise that someone who is just trying to join a team, a volunteer team, or is really not universally hated, they're welcomed. But if you see yourself that way, then you got to work on that some so that you can feel some of the love we all have to give you. Because we're waiting here to be your friend and do stuff with you. We're waiting for you. We're waiting out here in the world for you to get over that self-hatred. But you won't be able to date comfortably until you feel comfortable with friends. That's for sure.
And I think, you were serving on a board. So for me, if I'm serving, that is a really good, because then I know I'm doing something right. So that helps me get in the right framework, because I'm doing something that is helpful to others. And so I know that I belong there because I'm doing something that is, in my opinion, good for other people. So it helps me reframe that I'm not being, So, okay. So how often do you find SA men act out with their wives' friends as a possessive and or acquaintances? Finding out that I knew at least 15 of these women and that they also lied to my face was excruciating double betrayal. Why would he go to so many women that I know?
Well, I don't know your husband, and so I can't answer that specific question, but I can speak generally about this. In my experience, there are different kinds of people who act out in different kinds of ways related to their early experiences of hurt and harm. For example, when I was acting out, I would only act out when I was traveling and out of town. I would never act out anywhere near my home with anyone I knew or anyone who could possibly know me or know anyone that I knew. And I can tell you that had something to do with the enmeshment and craziness in my home, that somehow I wanted to keep it out there. I didn't want it anywhere close to me. I don't know why. There are other men I work with who, in my mind, they kind of dirty their home. They invite a hooker into their home when their wife's not home. They have sex with a grocery clerk nearby. They have sex with, a school teacher in the same class as their kid. They're doing all this stuff around them like you describe. And there's an ickiness and an uncomfortableness to that, which I'm sure you feel, not only the humiliation, the embarrassment, but also this like, ooh, where am I safe? There's a really incestuous vibe to that for me. This idea that I just pepper and salt sexuality all around where I am and no one notices and pays attention, that's like a home where there's a lot of inappropriate stuff going on and no one's talking about it. So I would suggest to you that the ways that the sex addicts approach how they're going to act out with strangers, in affairs, online, that once they get to a real pattern of the way they're doing it, you can pretty much tell, I can pretty much line it up to how some of the challenges they had growing up. But the acting out is acting out. It's empty, it's lonely, it's pointless, it's about escape, and it has nothing to do with you personally, even though it affects you in every way. whether I'm doing it out of town or doing it locally. It's not about you, but it's going to hurt you a lot more if I have it all around our home. It makes our home smell bad.
So, yeah, this is from mid-50s husband. So this is from a partner. The mid-50s husband says it all started 10 years ago when he met a random woman in a coffee shop. She invited him to sit down, discussed her sex life, gave him her email address. He began 2-3 months of sexual emails, then acted out 2 to 3 months later with her when he returned to the city after he started with hookup sites. Does that seem realistic that an SA began spontaneously at age 45? He claims to have had 7 partners over 10 years, all casual, escalated in 2018, so more women in a shorter period of time.
Is this a wife or a spouse?
This is the wife of a male, so female, asking about a male husband.
I would find it very, very, very unusual if someone started without provocation, like they lost a job or their wife left, or something, their mother died. It's very unusual for someone to start acting out in middle age in that way without some history. I would be very surprised if there's not some history before that you don't know about. I'm not, we don't just start acting out in crazy ways at 46. That's just not going to happen. There has to be
careers. She added changed careers.
I don't care if he changed his arm. Whatever was going on with him was going on before he ever met you. You don't chronically use infidelity and casual sex as a means of of sustaining yourself for years and years and years, and not have any previous history. If it happened, there are those of us who hit middle age and we get a little crazy and we start fooling around for a while. We get in trouble and we go whack. We wake up and either we leave you and go off with someone else, or we stay with you and figure out what life's really about. But the idea that a man in middle age just sort of starts out of nowhere, I don't believe it. The only thing that would limit that, and I want to say that, is if there are neurological situations like Parkinson's, some forms of OCD, if he had some kind of stroke, that is, in other words, or a head injury. There are physical things that can happen, car accident, something, and after that he started doing this. That might be an indicator. And certainly there are brain injuries and illnesses that can lead to hypersexuality. And there are some medications, like Parkinson's medication among them, that can make people hypersexual. But if he didn't have a head injury, if he didn't have a major physical accident, injury, mental illness, something at 48, it was going on before.
Okay, so next question is, how should I navigate dating as an addict in recovery? I've recently discontinued a sexual relationship with a woman as I felt that it doesn't help in my healing and opens me up to continuing to escape my feelings by sexually acting out. But how do I handle things when I'm attracted to a woman and want to explore possibilities with her?
Okay, now that's a long answer, right, Tammy? I can't
Yes.
give a simple answer to that question. So this is for anyone in the room who either doesn't know how to date, or sexualizes all their dating, or dates all the wrong people and has decided, like, what's the point in dating? I always read the wrong. It's for all of you dater folks. There is a way for us to date, but we can't date like regular people. Just like alcoholics who are newly in recovery can't hang out in bars, those of us who have these issues do not do well when we are approaching love and relationship. Part of the reason is, the real reason is, that we're very needful people. If you're in this room and you're a sexual love addict, you're a needful person. You may not like your needfulness, but you are needful. We have early unmet needs, and they're deep and they're powerful. And when we meet someone who just might begin to meet some of those needs, sometimes on the second date or sometimes on the first, all those feelings from childhood come rushing up. And it's like that person, we throw rainbows over them and Christmas lights, and they're the most perfect person in the world. And we're telling our friends about them, and we're telling we can't stop thinking about them. And that is part of the natural process of bonding, but not maybe that quickly or intensely. Our problem when we date is that we lose our ability to discern. For sex addicts, we don't well discern the person we want to get to know from the person we want to have sex with. Once we find them sexy, we just want to get laid. On the other hand, if you are someone who's avoided dating because you've dated all the wrong people, you often want to get into the sex too quickly. You want to get something going. If you like the person, here's the deal. If you are single and in recovery, this is how you date. Number one, you get a posse. You get 2 or 3, in your case, a couple of men who hopefully are your sponsor, your best buddy, and your other friend in recovery. And you call these guys together and you say, dudes, I need help dating. Got my sex addiction fairly stable. Now I need a dating plan. Now I need to be held accountable to a dating plan, just like you're held accountable to a sex plan or a sexual sobriety plan. And then you go through your dating history with these guys and they hear every wrong choice you've made, every time you slept with someone too early, every time you gave up a possibly good situation, you're going to tell them about that. And every person you dated for all the wrong reasons that you should have stopped dating a long time ago, you're going to tell them all about that. So you're going to know your whole history. You're going to do an inventory around dating. And then you create a dating plan. And the way that I think about this is like a stoplight, red, yellow, green. And I mean, you're writing this out. Red lights are the women I do not want to date. Oh, they're still married. Oh, they're a heroin addict. Oh, they have 4 kids with 3 different guys and they're saying something about wanting to have a big family. In other words, there's something not right about this person, which if I was in the heat of my addiction or they had a really great body, I might lose my intellectual thought and go out with them a second time. But because I have a posse and because a date is a 1-hour visit to a brightly lit, ugly coffee shop that both of you come to in 2 separate cars and then you leave, and a second date is going for a walk in a park with lots of children and families around, you understand that it's going to slow you down. I don't want you to have sex right away. I would put that on my plan. I don't have sex before I know someone for 30 days or 60 days. And then before you go out, I'm telling you the whole story. This is a book in 1 sentence. You're going to call your sponsor, your posse, and you're going to say, hey, here's the woman I'm going out with, and this is what she's like, and this is where we're going, and this is how long I'm going to be there, and I'm going to call you when I get home. You make yourself accountable on both ends of that date. So when you get to the end of the date, which is an hour in an ugly coffee shop, brightly lit, 2 people leave in separate cars. I know what happens in cars. That's why I said that. You go to your people and you say, hey, this is the woman I dated and this is how it was. And then you say, I'd like to see her again, or I wouldn't. What do you think? And then the men in your life who know you, know your dating history, and know your plan, what you don't want to do, what's okay with you, they will say, okay, you can go on another date. And then you got to wait 2 or 3 days, and then you might be able to text the person and say, that was fun. Can I see you again? In other words, don't do this by yourself. If you're doing this by yourself, it's not going to go well. If we knew how to date and build intimacy, we wouldn't be in these rooms. Does it mean we cannot achieve dating and intimacy? Of course we can, but we need guidance because we get lost in the process. So before you have sex, which will raise the bonding, make sure you know who that person is. If you find yourself getting overly emotionally involved or overly sexually involved, pull back, get feedback before you take the next step. Dating is nothing to be fooled around with. It's got a lot of power for people like us, and we want to do it right. You're asking the right questions, but now you need to do the work. By the way, a yellow light in your plan is warning signs, like she doesn't laugh at my jokes, she doesn't return my phone calls, she's late all the time, she just talks about herself, stuff like that. And green lights are the things you like, oh, we both like art, oh, we both like soccer, oh, she laughs at my jokes, she's interested in me. And as you begin to do that, you also get a better sense of what kind of person you want and feels good to you and what makes you happy. And that's always a useful thing to work on figuring out.
So here's kind of a, well, but keep going, because this is more dating stuff. So last Monday I shared that I had lunch with a platonic friend. Well, I spent the week thinking too much about him and fantasizing. I liked him, but he is not available. Is the fantasizing reason enough to cut off contact with him? I like to convince myself that I can be friends with men when I really end up obsessing about them.
Well, this is I don't know if you were on In the Rooms. I do this same Q&A on a site called intherooms.com every Friday night at 6. And there was a woman last Friday who was talking about this. She was like, I've been going out with this guy, pardon me, and I realized I'm really having feelings for him. I'm attracted to him. He's not really interested in me, and he's got some issues. And she said, but I find myself obsessing about him nonetheless, even though I know he isn't the right person to date. Should I keep seeing him? And of course, you already know the answer, and I'll tell you why. A really wise woman who I was working with in a treatment center said this to me once. She said, if I'm going to go do something and I just do it, usually it's the right thing to do. That means I'm going to go have a bite to eat. I just have a bite to eat. I'm going to get some work done. I get some work done. I'm going to give someone a call. I give them a call. But when I find myself asking myself, is this good for me or not? 9 times out of 10, it isn't. And I'm trying to convince myself that it is. And oftentimes, by the way, you will find somebody out there, Lord knows, who will say, oh, why not? It's no big deal. Don't listen to that person. You know, you're questioning this for a reason. And so, yes, you were right. You should not see this person again. And the reason is nothing to do with them. It's that you have a hard time of holding on to yourself in the face of the potential of a love object. Doesn't mean you can't go out with them, but it does mean you can't go out with the unavailable ones. And it does also mean that when you go out with the others, you need a lot of support so you don't end up making an emotionally based decision rather than an intellectually based decision. Yes, you got to have the warm fuzzies with someone you're going to date. You want to hold their hand in the moonlight and walk through but on the other hand, you also need to know that they're a good person. And love addicts get so caught up in the emotions, we lose track intellectually of who the person is, and then we get deeper in than we want to. So at every step, we need support, direction, and help in our dating process.
So her continuation is, what do I tell him to cut it off?
Well, I'd have to know more. I don't know if they work together, if they were dating. I'd need to know more about that.
It's a platonic friend, so I think it's.
I would probably say, you know what I would tell them the truth. How's that? But not the whole truth. I would say something like, you know, I really enjoy being with you, and you're such a lovely man, but I'm really looking for someone to date, and you're not available. So I want to spend my man time looking for men who are available, and let's spend some time together once we're both in a couple. That's probably what I would do.
So going back to the person that had the you know, can somebody in their mid-40s get addicted? She said, is it possible that it started as a casual affair and then his behaviors got out of control and escalated into an addiction?
Everything is possible. I look at the politics of today and I think everything is possible. But I will say this, Tammy knows I'm kidding because we don't talk about politics here. And everything's possible. Is it possible that this will all work out and be perfect and great? I guess it's possible. Many things are possible. But I think, you know, really it's best to just do the right thing and do the best thing and take care of yourself. So if that's helpful anymore. No, I don't. I would stick to the rules.
Okay. So how do you know if your husband who's in treatment currently gets it, truly not just...
I'm sorry, Tammy, did I misanswer that question? Was that a question about, you sure what didn't come out of a 40 oh, I know. No, it didn't just come out of a fair, listen, okay, I know what I was gonna say, sorry.
Okay.
You're gonna track me, Tammy. I gotta kick my butt if I don't get the answer.
I was smiling at that one, so yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, I'm
with you.
It's a busy week.
Yes.
So, and it's only Monday. So this is what I had a client recently who was talking about a behavior that he felt very uncomfortable with, and he wanted to call it something other than it seemed like it was to me. Let's say he was into, I'm taking a good example. There were men who are into foot fetishes, let's say, and women. There are people into feet. And let's say he described, this client I was seeing was describing how he was into feet and liked to lick toes and was into feet and played with feet and loved feet. And, you know, and if I said to him, well, I think that sounds a lot like a foot fetish. And he said to me, oh, no, it couldn't be a foot fetish because I don't even like feet and I don't even wear shoes, or whatever he said. And he was very, very insistent. I would say to him something like, you know, I have not in my professional career run into any other circumstances under which the situation you described could be anything other than a foot fetish. So I'll say to you, you know, maybe people can launch full-blown sex addictions out of an affair at 48, but I have never met one. I've been doing this work for 30 years. People lie. My experience is much more often that they're lying than they're telling the truth. More often, they just tell you the part that they think you already know and don't want to let you in on anything else because they don't want to get in more trouble. It could be, as I said, that this person had a brain injury or some mental illness, a stroke, something happened to them physically, and their sexual behavior started going awry. But if not, middle-aged crazy does not look like chronic, repetitive for years and years. It usually resolves within a couple of years, usually when the person in question realizes they're about to lose everything they've had from before. I know you want a different answer, and maybe if I was a different therapist, I could give you one. But in my experience, nobody starts chronically sexually acting out in their 40s with no history. It just doesn't happen.
Okay. Yeah. And I was thinking, well, there's other forms of addiction. So I wondered if there was a different form of addiction. So
Yes.
I was drinking heavily, and now I quit drinking heavily. And so now I switched to this, I'm going
Yes.
to find something. It just, which behavior do I want to address?
Tammy, thank you for mentioning that, because we do have cross addictions. And so if he was regularly, let's say, smoking pot and then he stopped that, or he was regularly drinking and stopped that, or if he was heavily eating and maybe got a bypass. And in other words, when we don't have the ability to shove all those feelings over there, we might start looking for other places, and he may have found this. But what Tammy's saying is the process of addiction may move from one behavior or substance to another behavior and substance, but the emotional energy that drives it doesn't start at 48.
Yes, the inability to manage feelings, I'm sure, was prevalent long before that. Okay, so how do you know when your husband, who's in treatment currently, gets it truly and not just saying intellectualizing? There appears to be an understanding, but the head and heart doesn't seem to connect.
Right. Well, I can tell your husband will never get it as quickly as you would like him to. And also with us male sex addicts, you really need to judge us. You can only gain trust in us again watching our behavior over time. At this point, your husband's in treatment, you're at home, he's in the doghouse. I wrote a book about this. If you haven't read it, it's called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. Hopefully he's reading it to understand what you're going through and the pain that he's walking into when he comes home. But in my experience, male sex, we don't get it. Like, we really don't get it. I just finished a 2-week intensive with some guys. Oh, that's my dog drinking water. I was like, what is that? Sorry. And I can tell you that every man who walked in, 201, and I had a bunch of men that said they thought they understood their problem, and within 3 days they realized they had no idea how pervasive it was. I think when you really get into profound treatment, that's when you really get to see, wow, the nature of what you're really dealing with. And you either get that over the long term, lots of meetings, lots of program, lots of therapy, or in a more intensive way, like in one of the intensives that we do or other folks do.
Next question. Do you have any advice for a disclosure if your wife is not sure if the relationship will move forward? I was discovered 30 days ago and came clean. Yeah. Seeing a CSAT, SAA, faith-based group. We have a 2-year-old and due with number 2 in July. Acting out was last June with a prostitute just one time. And while I travel, I view these pages as porn. This happened after wife stopped couple therapy, and I felt there was no way to save the marriage. I became a workaholic and started building a new home to provide some value to my wife because I didn't know what to do. I've been working 5 to 6 days a week, and what you just said about keeping everything away from my home, I don't look at porn at home and have intimacy issues with my wife, not physical, but the fear of rejection. Read SA 101 and Out of the Doghouse for Christian men looking for answers. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so my general advice is that, and I try to stick to this, that if a couple is not committed to staying together, then I prefer to not do disclosure. And the reason is because if your spouse, if your wife is looking for a reason to end the relationship or really on the fence, and she hears something that's offensive or hard for her, she may decide in that moment not to stay together. And I guess that's okay. But then if you have kids and if there's going to be any kind of custody battles, you've just given her an entire laundry list of the ways you've hurt her and let her down that she can take to a lawyer. And that is, and our custody attorney. And that is not the reason we do disclosure. With all due respect to partners, you are absolutely need to know everything that we've done, and you have a right to know it, but not if you're leaving us. If you're leaving us, it doesn't matter. If you're leaving us or we're not staying together, then it's not, let me try it in a different way. The purpose of disclosure is to further couples' intimacy. It's to reduce the secrets and have a couple that is trying to work on healing have an equal playing ground for healing. It's not to give an angry person the information that they want so that they can feel better. And it's not to give someone who's thinking about divorce a ticket out. So I think what we say is when we, and I know this is difficult because your spouse is saying, well, but what if he tells me something in the disclosure that I can't live with? Well, I think from what you just said, I think I read while Tammy was reading because it was long. You saw one prostitute, you looked at some porn. You know, it doesn't sound like a huge amount of acting out. So not that a small amount is any less painful to her, but nonetheless, I don't think that's really divorceable material. But if your spouse is in a place of, I cannot live with this, I can never live with this, no matter what it is, I don't, you know, and you're going to tell me, but I'm not, you know, I probably would wait, or I wouldn't do it. Disclosure in the service of growing a relationship toward healing. And if there's not the intention of that on both sides, when we do disclosure, by the way, we talk to couples about putting the relationship in what we call a safe harbor, meaning no matter what comes up in the next 6 months or whatever period of time, unless it's truly physically or violent or abusive, if it's just us being upset, we will remain committed to the relationship for no matter what. We don't even have to be living together, but we will remain committed to the relationship while we're working on it until some of this heat cools. And if you and your wife can get to that place, then I say sure. But if she's not sure she wants to stay or not and is clear about that, I wouldn't do disclosure, no.
And it's really challenging because you're parents, so you will need to navigate co-parenting for the long haul, regardless of what happens.
One more thing about that, though, there are partners who will say, well, when I have all this, maybe I'll stay with you, but they're really trying to get all the information to go to a divorce lawyer. What I want to tell you partners is, I've worked in most states, pretty much lots of states, and I've talked to therapists most around the country. It doesn't matter who your husband or wife has slept with. It has nothing to do with custody. They don't care how, judges do not care how much someone has cheated. Judges do not care how much someone's seen a hooker. Judges don't care how much time you spent looking at porn. The only thing they care about is this child safe? Physically, emotionally, you know, has this man hurt this child? Has this man showed this child porn? Has this child, you know, other than that, if the child is being fed, being watered, and being taken to school, you get joint custody, because you have to understand that as hurt as you are, and I want to say this to all you spouses, and as angry as you are, there are men out there who hit their children. There are men out there who hit their wives. There are men out there who really need to not be with their spouses. But sex addicts are not necessarily among them. So I have high hopes for relationships continuing. I think about 75 to 80% of the couples I treat stay together because you guys have so much more going on together than just infidelity and lying. You know, you actually have kids and family and homes and church and, you know, and some of that and histories that you want to hold on to. So anyway, I hope that's a long, long answer to that question, but hopefully I got it in there somewhere.
I think you did. So you had mentioned about the brain injuries and things, and so somebody chimed in and said someone had a car accident which resulted in injury to 3 areas in my brain, including and especially the prefrontal lobe, which was the start of my acting out after navigating the teens and young adulthood very well. I just wanted to throw that comment in there because I thought that was useful too.
And you know what's great, Tammy, about that is both pieces. There's someone who's here because they had some kind of physical or health issue that led to them having a brain dysfunction, and now they have addictive behavior. But they're right here with us, and I really appreciate that you're here because it doesn't matter how you ended up that way. Early brain injuries related to early childhood trauma or something happened later in life, you're still stuck with having to manage impulses, and that's what we do, you know. That's why we're here. Yeah,
and one chimed in that looking backwards probably was an essay, but truly kept it under control until after the
right. Yeah, because you lose the ability to manage the impulse. You may have it, but yeah, I get that.
Okay, so here's someone in their 60s who's been married over 30 years. I'm learning a lot about narcissism, specifically covert passive-aggressive narcissism. My SA seems to fit this model to a T. He has ruined so many holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries that I have come to dread special occasions. My adult children will no longer join us for holidays. It breaks my heart. What is behind this awful behavior?
Well, I can never say what's wrong behind your spouse's behavior, but I can say I just worked with a couple of guys in their 60s, and you know what I believe was behind a lot of that behavior was trauma. Men especially, men in particular in our culture, don't often look back unless they have to. They're plowing ahead. And a lot of things that we men, women too, but men in particular might see as not being traumatizing because, well, that's just what happened to me or it was my fault. When they get into therapy, we also often figure out, wow, there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of stuff under there. So my answer to your question is, right, that, and let me go on a little bit further. You know, there is a difference, and I want to say this, between someone who's in active addiction and someone who's in recovery. I've said this before, I say this often, Tammy's sick of hearing this, but I often think about, you know, the heroin addict who might steal his kid's college fund to get more drugs. And believe me, he will if he needs the drugs and he has access to that account. But sober, he might work 3 jobs to put the money back in that account because he doesn't want his kids to ever miss out anything because of his addiction. In other words, addiction, when you're in addiction, addiction is narcissistic by definition, because it's all about me and all what I'm interested in. All I care about is the drugs. All I care about is the sex. I don't care about the kids, the family. I got to get to the drugs, got to get to the sex. So when you're in an addiction, you will ruin everything. You won't consider other people's feelings. What's important to you is just what's important to you. I cannot say that that is necessarily who someone is. I have to get them out of the addiction long enough, and the addiction, not just the behavior, but all the lying and the manipulation and the seductions and all the stuff around it. I need to give them 6 months, a year to see who they are when they're not lying, cheating, manipulating, gaslighting, and they're just living. They still might not be the warmest, friendliest, most loving husband, but they're not necessarily going to be the same asshole that you had before. So in essence, I think if you liked, excuse my language, if you liked the asshole you had before, but you didn't like his cheating, and he was a little selfish, but most of it could be worked on, probably it's going to get better. And if you really hated how he was treating you for years and years and years, and it wasn't just that maybe he was doing this or that, but he wasn't a good dad. He wasn't an available partner. You don't have fun together, even on the best of times, then maybe you're not a happy couple. Happy couples run into serious problems like addiction, and they get through it. Unhappy couples run into serious problems like addiction, and they figure out that they're better off apart. But that doesn't mean they're not going to find somebody later and be a happy couple. You know, addicts can be happy apart. And one more thing. Tammy hates when I go on and on, but I'll do it.
No, I don't. You're good.
You know, I think I'm projecting. I hate when I go on and on. I don't think people act out because they're in the wrong relationship. I will tell you that. I don't even think straight men act out I don't even think men, how do I say this? I don't even think that men who are bisexual act out with men when they're in a relationship with a woman just because they're in an unhappy relationship. Acting out with people outside your relationship and not talking to your partner first is about you. Not about how you handle the relationship, your feelings, how you acted or don't act it is on you, not necessarily the relationship. So, Tammy, what am I saying that's confusing you? I know there's something.
Well, let's see.
Gay bi, maybe, how do I say this? I know men who are bisexual, who are faithful to their wives because they love them and they respect them and their marriage is important to them. And even though they would like to be with men too, they don't do it, because they respect the person they're with and they tolerate the grief of not being able to do something they would like to do. Is that really that different than any straight 35-year-old guy who sees hot women at the beach and thinks, oh, I would rather be with those women than my wife? He doesn't do that either if he's a nice guy. If he's an addict or he's really broken, he shoves his wife aside and he goes for all of that. But that's really about him. It's not about how happy his relationship was or how well things are going. Actually, sometimes we act out when things are starting to go really well because we can't tolerate the intimacy. It's too close. It's too warm. It's too fuzzy. We just got to shove you away. So how things have gone when someone is in addiction is not an indicator of how they're going to go when someone is sober. They may be very, very different.
So just for everybody's clarification, I don't hate when you go on and on because you're answering the question, you're sharing relevant information. So, and the next question I will answer.
I know what the next question is.
I'm going to give you a break on this one. So thank you for your response and disclosure. Where can I find the recording of this? So thanks to everyone who voted last week. This will be recorded and posted on the website, not tonight, but hopefully tomorrow it'll be on there. So you can
whatever.
But there's lots more. The one with John Taylor earlier today, lots of these other ones. So keep going back to sex and relationships.
I heard you had you had a really good webinar today, Tammy.
I think he did a great job. It was
what do you do on Wednesdays? Or Mondays?
It's with John Taylor, Rock and Relationships, and it was on defensiveness. And so he talked about that and then answered questions. So it was good. for the addicts, do not, oh, this is a kind of a statement, do not do disclosure yourself or with or without a CSAT therapist or some trained professional. A couple of therapists did more damage thinking they could help the addict. They created more damage with their sex addict expertise than could have been avoided. As a result, long-term marriages ending. Painful but staggered disclosures full of lies finally did irreversible damage and total lack of trust in anything he says now. I want to clarify too. I get so many calls and emails after the fact. I call them the vomit disclosures, where the partner is going, tell me, or the addict is going, I want to bare my soul, I want to clear the air. And that to me always feels like I want to feel better, so I'm going to throw up on you. And they get these details that they can never unhear. You know, they're able to recite, you know, the actual details, dates, locations, everything that they've discovered. And it's, you know, and then now that's up in their heads and they can't get rid of it. So I concur, please, you know, please do yourself and your relationship a world of good, and wait, you know, get professional help. Email me beforehand and I'll tell you this.
And let me just say something quick about that. And I'm going to follow up on what Tammy said. It's very tempting and understandable that you would want to tell your spouse everything when they're asking. And you figure, well, they really want to know, and I do know. And if I just tell them, maybe they'll feel better and we can get past this. That's not going to happen. First of all, no one's going to get past anything for a year or more. If you've cheated, it's going to take at least a year for the healing to come to fruition. Nobody gets out of cheating in a month or two. And just because you tell someone something, you know what that means? It just means they're going to have more questions. And after that, they're going to have more questions. And after that, they're going to have more. And you, the addict, don't know what to say or not say because you've started down this rabbit hole. And now your spouse is saying, well, you told me this part. Can't you just tell me that? I mean, there you go, lying again, because spouses are angry and they want to know. And it's our job, Lord knows, as much as we've tried to hide, here's your chance to actually say, you know what? I don't want to tell you anymore right now because it doesn't feel safe to me. And I want to do this in front of a professional so I don't hurt you or me. That's not hiding. That's not keeping secrets. That's respecting your relationship. It's not fair to dump all the information on your spouse just because they want to know. You don't know what's appropriate to say or not. And they don't know. They will keep asking, as Tammy said, until they hear things that they'll never get out of their heads, and nor things they don't need to hear. So, and by the way, and I'll say this to you spouses, I worked with a couple of gentlemen recently who said to me, we were doing an intensive. By the way, we do 2-week intensives here in California, and I run them. I'm not going to be doing that much longer, but I'm doing them now. Probably the next few months, I'm going to be running them, which means I go to every group, I do every exercise, and I run the treatment. And if you want more information about that, let Tammy know. And we can include partner stuff and spouses stuff as well. We're running very small individualized work, but we start on April 21st?
21st.
Okay. But in the last training that I just ran, I had a couple of men interestingly say to me, and ladies and wives, listen, because you really, I don't even know if you can, well, I'll just say it. Tammy, I want your response to this, okay?
Okay.
I had a couple of gentlemen I was in treatment with say to me, and this is the men talking, not me, okay? So don't go after me. Saying, two of them, one of them in particular, said, my wife hounded me so much, so many times for the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth. And I didn't know what to do. And I was so overwhelmed. And I didn't know what to tell her or not, that I started making things up. Because I thought if I made up a story that would satisfy her, maybe she would stop asking. And what he didn't realize was the minute he made up a story, there were going to be more questions and more questions. Then he's lying about the lies. And then he doesn't know what's straight. We get so desperate to try to shut you up, calm you down, get you off our backs, that we'll just tell you anything. And that's not good for you or good for us. So if you find yourself as a spouse hounding, nagging, demanding for information, call a therapist and let us help you get that information, because it may or may not mean the continuation of your relationship.
So there's lots more coming in, but I want you to answer this one. Dr. Rob, have you treated individuals who are compulsive liars and believe their own lies? Yes, all the time. My SA has multiple diagnoses: bipolar, narcissistic, borderline disorder, sex addiction, food addiction, and becomes violent easily. My husband tells lies that no one would believe. Sometimes so far-fetched, I get the urge to laugh, but I don't dare. He will defend his lies to the end of time.
Yep, that sounds like an addict. So the question really is, who is he when he's not, when he's Who is he when he's worked on himself, gotten some time sober, on medication, in a treatment center, whatever he needs to do? But if he's really, and honestly, there's part of the reason, if you look underneath the lies, why do we lie to you? Let's just talk about that. Why do we lie to you? Because we are afraid of you. We are lied. It's not right. It's not a good reason, but we lie because we're afraid you'll get madder. We're afraid you'll leave. We're afraid you will do whatever. And so we just lie because we're afraid if you hear this, then you're going to do that. But if you just hear this, in other words, we're trying to have control over you. When you ask questions of us, it makes us feel out of control, you know, because the answers, if we were allowed to give them, everything would be out of control. So we try to control what we give you so that we think in our minds we can control the outcome of how you're going to feel if we only tell you so much or only tell you parts of it, or we're trying to control. It's called damage control. That's why we lie so much. But the question I would have for you is, if your husband or wife gets into recovery and they stop having things to lie about, maybe you'll have someone you want. Now, I'll say one more thing. I had a client once, this is true, who was working on his recovery, was doing really well with sexual recovery, but lied to his wife about taking out the garbage. She came home that night. She said, honey, you took out the garbage. You said you were going to. He said, of course I did. She went in the bathroom to wash her hands, and he knew that he hadn't taken it out, and he raced the garbage out to the curb while his wife was sitting there in the restroom. She saw him. She came back out and said, I'm leaving you. He was like, what, are you kidding me? It was just the garbage. She said, look, if I can't trust you to take out the garbage when you say you're going to, why can I trust you to not, well, how can I trust you that you're not with other women? And she wasn't talking about whether he was sober or not. What she was talking about is, could he be honest? And his lack of honesty cost him his marriage, not his sexual acting out. And I suggest to you that when we get clean with you in a way that we can both tolerate, that's when the real truth is in the pudding. When the truth is out, when we're clear and we're starting to rebuild a relationship, then you got to see if I'm a liar or not. Too soon.
So this is just real quick. Two quick things. One said, go get qualified help for disclosure. This person disagrees with you, thinks you're amazing, but disagrees with you about disclosure. I did not get disclosure due to a divorce and feel so unsafe in the world, not knowing who they are, and have developed panic attacks when I leave the house. So what you're saying is I have to pay the consequences for wanting a divorce, and he walks freely in the world. So
Well, I don't think anybody walks freely. If you're having panic attacks, that's your problem. Doesn't matter where it came from. You need to get help for that. Don't point your finger at him. He's not even in your life. Go get help for your panic attacks. You may find they go back further than him too. I don't know. But yes, I am saying that if a spouse has put up with a lot and they have had enough and they're walking, that getting the information is not going to make them feel better. You will not have panic attacks because you found out. What's a good example of that? You're having panic attacks because your world is out of control, your marriage went out of control, your husband's, not just because of disclosure. And I don't know you, but I know that it isn't just one factual piece of information or 100 is going to end panic attacks. There are many other reasons to have them, and you do need to go get help for them because they're really scary and terrifying, especially if you're driving or something. But the end of your marriage is not, it's simply moving your marriage to a different stage, hopefully, of if you have kids together, working together, supporting each other in a different way. And another reason we don't do disclosure if a marriage is not staying together is we want to make sure that child support and all those things are done in a healthy way without being vindictive or rageful. And I wish there were another way of doing this. I wish you asked me the question, and I want to go back to the question you asked exactly as you asked it, if I can find it. You said you don't agree with my answer. So my answer was not for partners. I didn't say that partners would be better off or happier if you didn't get disclosure. What I said is that we don't do disclosure for couples breaking up to protect things like child support and child custody, because they really don't have anything to do with cheating. And we're also trying to just protect how you're going to raise your kids together, no longer being together, and all of that. I fully understand that you feel you deserve it. And I still think you're better off without it. You're having panic attacks without it. I can only imagine where you'd be if you had it. And Tammy, we're out of time.
We are more than out of time. So thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, I just want to tell you guys, hey, you don't have to agree with everything. Just take what you like and leave the rest. The things you heard that were useful, use them. The things that aren't useful, say, well, poor Rob doesn't know everything. I know a few things he doesn't, and I appreciate that. I hope you do. We'll be here every Monday night at 5 o'clock, and if you want to learn more about the treatment we do, that's at seekingintegrity.com. Thank you, Tammy, for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Rob.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Seeing you all soon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye for now.